The Theater History Podcast is supported by HowlRound, a Knowledge Commons by and for the theater community. It's available on iTunes and howlround.com. Hi, and welcome to the Theater History Podcast. Many Cole Porter fans know his song Love for Sale, but they probably have never seen the show from which it comes, 1930's The New Yorkers. Now, however, New York City Center Encores is producing The New Yorkers from March 22nd through March 26th. We're joined today by Jack Viertel. He's the artistic director of New York City Center Encores and senior vice president at Jujamcyn Theaters. He's also the author of The Secret Life of the American Musical, How Broadway Shows Are Built. Jack, thank you so much for joining us.
I'm so happy to be here.
What can you tell us about the origins of this show, The New Yorkers?
The New Yorkers is a unique show in the sense that it was the brainchild of a cartoonist named Peter Arno, who was the first sort of indisputably great cartoonist for the New Yorker magazine. The New Yorker magazine started in 1925, which is when Arno went to work there. And he had a fascination with Broadway, and he knew a lot of Broadway folks. And he and a producer named E. Ray Getz approached Cole Porter and Herbert Fields, who were a successful collaborating team of musical comedy writers, about doing a show that made fun of New York's classes and at the same time sort of promoted the name of the magazine.
And what exactly was this show? You wrote recently for Playbill, kind of saying that it's a bit book musical, a bit revue. It sort of sounds like a jumble of a bunch of different types.
I think it was a jumble, but I think it lived in a world in which jumbles were a familiar genre, so to speak. It is a book musical in the sense that it has characters and a story and scenes, and it progresses through a romance that ends happily, and all the things that you would expect in a book musical. But it also behaves like a revue in the sense that many of the numbers in the show are numbers performed in nightclubs by the characters. And the producers hired both Jimmy Durante, who was a leading comedian of the time, and Fred Waring's Pennsylvanians, who were a leading vocal and instrumental group of the time, who came and went through the show. The Pennsylvanians didn't really play roles in it, but Jimmy Durante did play a role in it, but he also got to do some of his vaudeville numbers, which were not written by Cole Porter, more or less without excuse. So it is a real hybrid and unique in our experience.
The scale of this thing sounds pretty impressive. I mean, 3 different bands, 2 different choruses. You mentioned Jimmy Durante. I mean, that's quite a lot there to attract theater goers.
Yes, it was right after the Wall Street crash, which was in late 1929. The show opened in early 1930. And I think Ray Getz, who was the producer, really wanted to create a kind of opulent, carefree, expensive reaction to all of the bad news around him. And in that respect, it sort of resembles the Fred Astaire and Ginger Rogers movies of the 30s, which always seemed to exist outside of what was happening in the real United States, which was the Great Depression.
Now, aside from the economic and to some degree political context, you're also writing about this play kind of in the context of something called the Hays Code and something that actually I had never heard of called the Padlock Law. What were these laws, and what do they have to do with the New Yorker?
Well, the Hays Code, which a lot of people have heard of, the production code for movies, was introduced by Hollywood in the same year that the New Yorkers was produced, and it was a sort of an attempt to stave off government censorship of Hollywood movies, which had become very morally loose, so to speak, very amoral. And loved dealing with gangsters and women who slept their way to the top and people having affairs and all of that. And audiences loved that too, but the government felt that this was not proper. And so the production code was introduced to sort of set up a set of guidelines for what movies could and couldn't be. And it definitely sanitized Hollywood's output for years to come. Though Padlock Law, which is much more obscure, was a New York state law passed in 1927 that was an excuse for shutting down burlesque houses, basically, and other houses that showed what was considered, morally questionable material. It was almost never invoked on Broadway, but it was on the books. And the New Yorkers was a sort of cheerfully amoral show Peter Arno's cartoons were very much satirizing, wealthy older men with gold digging mistresses and older women chasing after younger men, and people drinking themselves under the table, and a sort of a world that was not part of the official view of what the proper United States should look like. But of course, the New Yorker magazine was a very sophisticated magazine and was playing to its customers. And the show does that to a great degree. It's about a young heiress who falls for a bootlegger, and her mother's young lover, and her father's young mistress, and a bunch of gangsters who keep shooting each other. And it's generally quite busy, ignoring all of the rules of propriety.
Yeah, you mentioned the New Yorker. I mean, you call this sort of an early example of cross-promotional branding.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know very much about the discussions, obviously, that went on in 1930 or 1929 before the show opened about how the show might help the magazine and how the magazine might help the show. But Peter Arno drew the cover of the playbill in a very distinctive style that anyone who was familiar with the New Yorker would recognize. He drew the cover art for the Pajama Game original cast album in the 50s, so anyone wanting to know what his work looked like can see it there. That's still very much available. But clearly they were having some fun trying to make a success of both the show and the magazine.
Now, in bringing this show back, it's tricky because it didn't really exist in any sort of form. Like, there wasn't a script somewhere in an archive. And you write at one point in this playbill piece, for a show that spends a bit of time making fun of sophomore collegiate style, the resurrection of the New Yorkers actually owes a debt to some good university research centers. How did the team at Encores go about reconstructing this? To what extent is it a sort of facsimile of the original 1930 production?
Well, what we started with were two scripts, neither of which seemed to have been the final Broadway script, nor is it clear that there ever was a final Broadway script, because songs went in and out of the show and performers went in and out of the show even while it was running. And we have several playbills from the Broadway show that don't match up to each other. The published sheet music from the show, some unpublished sheet music that was given to us by the Cole Porter Trust. But there were no orchestrations, there were no vocal arrangements, there was no kind of score from which to operate, and the two scripts don't really agree with each other about what happened on stage either. So we took all that material. We had researchers who work with us who went to the Fred Waring collection at Penn State University, and there is a Jimmy Durante archive at UCLA in Los Angeles, and we discovered a lot of material there, including some orchestrations, some of Jimmy Durante's routines that were in the show, and so we were able to have a lot of hints about what the show would have sounded like or might have sounded like. We also did have complete scores of a Porter show written the year before this and another one written the year after it. So we know pretty much what the orchestration techniques were at that time. And we were able to reconstruct, a vehicle that we can perform from the overture to the final curtain. It I think, resembles the original in spirit very much, and in detail, not so much. Because some of the songs are missing. There's only one Porter song that's missing, but there are a couple of Durante songs that are missing. Most of the Fred Waring material is missing. We actually have interpolated some Cole Porter songs that were written around the same time as the New Yorkers into it to fill out the score. And the show itself being so fast and loose and changing over the course of its run, we felt some liberty in doing that we wouldn't with a more complete show.
Lastly, on kind of a personal note, how did you discover this show, and what do you find significant about it?
Well, I first heard of the show, frankly, because we did a concert back in 2001 at Encores that included the song I Happen to Like New York, which was a song I knew. Judy Garland recorded it, so I knew it from that recording. But I didn't know where it had come from. I knew it was a Cole Porter song. And when I read that it came from this musical, The New Yorkers, I just thought to myself, I wonder what that musical is. I've never actually heard of that musical. And so I did some quick research. and was able to turn up some information about it. But then when I contacted the Cole Porter Trust and they sent me the materials that they had, which included the 2 scripts, and I started to read it, I thought, well, this is actually, in my experience, and we've produced, 65 or 70 musicals at Encores, a unique piece. It's, first of all, the form of it is this strange amalgam of book show, revue, and variety show. Secondly, its attitude, its attitude about sexuality and alcohol and how life is lived in Manhattan is not like any other show I've ever encountered from that period or any other period, frankly. And third, aside from the obvious quality of Porter's writing, it is a Valentine to the city that never was. And I just felt, the more I read it, the more I felt compelled to put in front of an audience today, a New York audience today, and our audience is largely a local audience. This, for all of its nonsense and its craziness, this heartfelt, beautiful a tribute to New York as we dream it is, even if it's not the way it really is, and how strongly the people who wrote this show felt about that. And it comes through in so many different ways. So I thought this is a strange combination of pure and very passionate sentiment with utter and total nonsense, with a kind of completely sexually liberated world. And I thought, well, we'll never see anything like that before or since, and we'll never see it again. So let's do it.
A reminder that the New York City Center Encores production of The New Yorkers runs March 22nd through the 26th. We'll include more information about the Encores production of The New Yorkers as well as Encores itself in the show notes, and we'll also link to Jack Viertel's article about the show in Playbill. Jack, thank you so much for a great conversation.
It was a pleasure.
If you'd like to continue today's conversation, please visit howlround.com and follow HowlRound and @TheaterHistory on Twitter. A big thank you to the staff at HowlRound who make this show possible. Our theme music is The Black Crook Gallop, which comes to us courtesy of the New York Public Library Libretto Project and Adam Roberts. Thanks as well to Tip Kress, who designed our logo. And finally, thank you for listening.